The sky above Aetheron's capital turned the color of old blood. Elias Marrow stood in the Grand Archive's observation tower, watching the celestial eclipse creep across the sun like a stain spreading through water. His hands trembled as he adjusted the resonance meter, a brass device humming with arcane energy, its needle dancing wildly. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. The crown's resonance should have been stable. It had been stable for over 1,000 years. The high crown sat atop the celestial spire in the heart of the capital, a crystalline artifact that pulsed with contained starlight. For centuries, it had been the continent's anchor, its silent guardian against the chaos that once threatened to tear reality apart. Elias had spent 10 years studying it. He knew its rhythms like his own heartbeat. This was wrong. The needle slammed to the far right. Red lightning split the darkened sky. Then the world shattered. The explosion wasn't sound, it was feeling. A wave of pure force that rewrote the air itself, turning stone to powder and thought to static. Elias felt himself thrown backward, his body slamming into something hard. Pain flared across his ribs. When his vision cleared, the celestial spire was gone. In its place, 7 brilliant fragments arced across the sky like falling stars, each trailing a different color: gold, silver, crimson, obsidian, white, violet, amber. And one of them was coming straight toward him. Elias tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. The amber fragment pierced through the tower's shattered wall and embedded itself in his chest. He screamed. Not from pain, though there was pain, but from the sudden flood of knowing. 1,000 truths crashed into his mind at once, unwanted and undeniable. He saw the crown's history, the entity it contained, the corruption already spreading through the chosen bearers. He saw the end of everything. When the guards found him hours later, half buried in rubble, Elias Marrow was the only survivor of the Grand Archive, and he alone understood what had just been unleashed upon the world. Before we continue, please like and subscribe for more support, and comment about your favorite character below. 3 days after the shattering, Queen Aetheron of the Central Plains stood before her council, radiating literal light. The golden fragment had embedded itself in her palm during the eclipse, and now her entire body glowed faintly, as if she'd swallowed the sun. She could heal wounds with a touch, illuminate darkness with a thought, and see the truth in people's hearts. It felt like a blessing. "Your Majesty," Lord Castor said carefully, "the border villages report increased bandit activity. They're requesting—" "I will go myself," Alyra interrupted, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "These people need more than soldiers. They need hope." Her council exchanged uneasy glances. "Your Majesty, you cannot personally attend to every village." "Can't I?" Alyra's smile was serene, but her eyes blazed. "I have been given this gift for a reason, Castor. The crown's shattering was not an accident, it was a test, and I will prove worthy of it." She raised her glowing hand, and the council chamber filled with warm golden light. Several lords shielded their eyes. "I will bring order to this chaos," Alyra continued softly. "I will unite the kingdoms under a single righteous banner. No more war, no more suffering, just peace." The light intensified, even if I must force them to accept it. In the frozen wastes of the northern reaches, General Thorn stood bare-chested in a blizzard, letting soldiers strike him with hammers. The silver fragment had fused with his skin, turning it to living metal. He felt no cold, no pain, no doubt. Each hammer blow rang like a bell and left no mark. "Harder," Thorn commanded. The soldiers hesitated. "I said harder." They obeyed. The hammering intensified, echoing across the frozen training ground. Thorn closed his eyes and smiled. Strength. Finally, true strength. He'd spent 20 years as a general, climbing through ranks with strategy and discipline. But strategy could fail. Discipline could break. Only raw, undeniable power was eternal. The North had always valued strength above all else. Now he would show them what strength truly meant. "Cease," Thorn said, and the hammering stopped instantly. He turned to his assembled officers, his metallic skin gleaming in the dim Arctic light. "The southern kingdoms are weak," he announced, "divided. The Central Plains have their glowing queen, but light fades. The volcanic isles burn themselves out. The highlands hide in their mists like cowards. He clenched his fist and the air itself seemed to shudder. "We will march south when winter breaks. We will take what is rightfully ours. And when I stand atop the ruins of the old kingdoms, no one will ever question the supremacy of the North again." His officers roared approval. Thorne smiled. Conquest was simply logic. The strong ruled. The weak submitted. It was the natural order of things. Kira moved through the darkness like smoke, the obsidian fragment cold against her collarbone. She'd been hired to eliminate a corrupt merchant in the Highlands capital, a simple job she'd done 100 times before, but tonight was different. Tonight, the shadows welcomed her. She materialized behind her target in his study, blade already moving toward his throat. The merchant spun, eyes wide, and Kira saw a child's drawing on his desk, crude crayon marks spelling, "I love you, Papa." Her hand froze. The merchant scrambled backward, screaming for guards. Kira should have finished it, wanted to finish it, but something in her chest twisted painfully. She fled through the shadows instead, leaving the merchant alive and terrified. Hours later, she collapsed in an abandoned warehouse, gasping. Her hands shook. The fragment pulsed with cold disapproval. Weakness, it seemed to whisper. Hesitation. Failure. Kira had been an outcast since childhood, abandoned by her family, raised by the Assassin's Brotherhood, trained to feel nothing. And for years, she'd succeeded. But now the shard was erasing even her carefully controlled emotions. Soon she wouldn't hesitate. Soon she'd be the perfect weapon. The thought terrified her. In the volcanic isles, Prince Rowan Ashcroft set fire to his own throne room. It was an accident. He'd been arguing with his advisors about trade routes when the anger surged, sudden and overwhelming. The crimson fragment burned in his chest, and flames erupted from his hands, consuming tapestries and furniture in seconds. By the time he regained control, half the palace was ablaze. "Your Highness!" A guard burst in, coughing through smoke. "We need to evacuate." "I didn't mean to," Rowan said numbly, staring at his smoking palms. I was angry, and then..." But the guard was already dragging him toward safety. Later, standing outside the burning palace, Rowan watched the flames dance against the night sky. Part of him was horrified. Another part felt powerful. For once in his life, people weren't looking at him with pity or dismissal. They were looking at him with fear. And God's help him, he liked it. Elder Selene of the Misty Highlands stood in her meditation chamber, surrounded by absolute silence. The white fragment had stolen sound itself from her presence. Within 100 paces, all noise ceased. Wind, rain, breath, heartbeat. Even magic fell mute. It should have been disturbing. Instead, Selene felt only clarity. For decades, she'd served as the Highlands' spiritual leader, mediating disputes and offering wisdom. But wisdom required feeling, and feeling was messy, irrational, inefficient. Now, freed from the noise of emotion, she could see everything with perfect logical precision. Her acolytes needed her. The Highlands needed her. But need was just another emotional attachment. Selene walked to her window, looking out over the mist-shrouded valleys. Somewhere out there, the other fragments were causing chaos, violence, ambition, fear. She should care. She didn't. Selene turned away from the window and walked deeper into her temple, leaving her acolytes waiting outside in increasingly desperate silence. If they truly needed her guidance, they would learn to communicate without sound. If they couldn't adapt, they weren't worth teaching. The man with violet eyes stood at a crossroads, trying to remember his name. It had been something with an E, or maybe a D. The violet fragment embedded in his temple pulsed softly, and another memory dissolved like morning fog. He'd been traveling north, he thought. Or was it south? There was something important he needed to do, something about... The thought vanished. He looked down at his hands. They were covered in old ink stains. Scholar's hands, perhaps. That felt right, though. He couldn't remember why. Thunder rumbled overhead, answering his confusion. The Wanderer, he'd started calling himself that since no other name stuck, raised his hand and lightning danced between his fingers. At least he remembered that part. A village lay ahead, smoke rising from cooking fires. Maybe they'd have food. Maybe they'd know his name. Maybe this time the memories would stay. The Wanderer walked forward, purple electricity crackling softly around him, leaving no footprints in the dust. By the time he reached the village, He'd forgotten why he'd come, but the storm followed him anyway. Elias spent the first week after the shattering in a refugee camp outside the ruined capital, trying not to go insane. The truth fragment showed him everything. Every lie the refugees told to spare each other's feelings. Every half-truth from the camp organizers about dwindling supplies. Every possible future branching out from every decision, most of them ending in blood and fire. He couldn't turn it off. "You look terrible," a voice said. Elias looked up to find a woman with short-cropped hair and a soldier's bearing. She wore a dented breastplate marked with the royal crest, a knight of the capital's fallen guard. "I'm fine," Elias lied. The fragment pulsed. "False. You haven't slept in 4 days. You're seeing visions of societal collapse. You're terrified." "Right," the woman said dryly. "I'm Lyra Kendris, and you're Elias Marrow, the archivist who survived the spire. People are saying you might know what happened." Elias hesitated. The fragment showed him Lyra's possible reactions: disbelief, fear, anger, or worst of all, understanding. He chose honesty. The crown wasn't just a symbol, he began quietly. It was a prison, for something old and powerful. And now that prison is broken and 7 people are walking around with pieces of a celestial entity embedded in their souls. Lyra stared at him. "And these pieces are, what, corrupting them?" "Amplifying them," Elias corrected, "taking their strongest traits and pushing them past any rational limit. Queen Lyra will become a tyrant convinced she's a savior. General Thorn will drown the continent in war, and the others—" He trailed off, seeing futures stack like cards about to fall. "They'll destroy everything if we don't stop them." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she unslung her sword and planted it in the ground between them. "So, how do we stop them?" Finding allies proved easier than Elias expected. Marin Voss found him, a young scholar from the University of the Plains, clutching a journal filled with frantic notes about magical resonance patterns. They'd been studying the crown's energy signature for their dissertation when it shattered. "The fragments are still connected," Marin explained excitedly, spreading star charts across a camp table. "Look, every time a bearer uses their power, it creates a resonance ripple. If we can track those ripples, we can find them." "And do what?" Lyra asked skeptically. "Ask nicely if they'd like to give up godlike power." "There's a way to reunite them," Elias said quietly. "A ritual at the original Crown Forge, deep beneath the old capital. If we can gather all 7 fragments—" He stopped. The truth fragment whispered the final cost, but he wasn't ready to voice it yet. "Then we need to move fast," said a new voice from the shadows. Elias spun to find a lean man with quick eyes and quicker hands perched on a supply crate. He hadn't heard anyone approach. "Name's Jax," the man said cheerfully, tossing and catching a stolen apple. "Professional finder of things and people. Heard you're looking for fragment bearers. I happen to know where most of them are." "How?" Lyra started. "I'm good at my job." Jax grinned. "Also, people talk. Especially when reality starts breaking and their rulers start acting like divine lunatics." Elias studied him. The truth fragment confirmed Jax was telling the truth. Mostly. He had his own reasons for helping, but they weren't malicious. "We can't pay you," Elias said. "Don't need paying. World ending is bad for business." Jax bit into the apple. "Besides, this sounds way more interesting than another caravan job. When do we leave?" Lyra looked at Elias. "You're really doing this?" Elias thought about the futures he'd seen. Kingdoms burning, reality tearing, the entity finally breaking free to consume everything. Then he thought about the other futures, the narrow, painful paths that led to survival. "We leave tomorrow," he said. "First stop, the Misty Highlands. We find Elder Selene." The Highlands lived up to their name. Perpetual mist clung to everything like cold breath, muffling sound and obscuring vision. Elias's group traveled for 3 days before reaching Selene's temple complex. They found it abandoned. "This is wrong," Marin whispered, their voice barely carrying in the unnatural quiet. "There should be dozens of acolytes here, pilgrims, priests." "There," Jax pointed. A single figure sat motionless in the temple courtyard, a young woman in acolyte's robes, staring at nothing. Lyra approached carefully. "Excuse me." The woman didn't respond, didn't even blink. "She can't hear you," Elias realized, feeling the truth fragment pulse. The silence isn't just around Selene anymore. It's spreading. They found more acolytes scattered throughout the temple, sitting, standing, some frozen mid-task, all trapped in perfect absolute silence, unable to speak or hear or even process what had happened to them. Elias's skin crawled. "Selena did this?" Lyra breathed. "The fragment did this," Elias corrected. "She probably doesn't even see it as wrong anymore. Just necessary. Logical." They found Selene herself in the inner sanctum, seated in meditation before an empty altar. Elias approached slowly, feeling sound die around him with each step. By the time he stood before her, even his heartbeat had gone silent in his ears. Selene opened her eyes. Her lips moved. "What do you want?" Elias couldn't hear his own voice, but he tried anyway. "I need your help. The fragments are destroying us." Selene's expression remained perfectly neutral. She raised one hand and words appeared in the air, formed from condensed mist. "Everything destroys eventually. I have simply removed the noise before the end." "That's not peace," Elias said desperately. "That's emptiness." "They are the same." Selene stood and walked past him toward the exit. More mist words formed. "Leave my temple. Your emotions are inefficient." And then she was gone, disappearing into the highland mists like she'd never existed at all. "Well," Jack said once they'd retreated beyond the silence field, "that went great." Elias didn't respond. He was seeing futures again, branching paths, and in none of them did Selene willingly return. They'd have to try a different bearer. Kira found them first. Elias woke to cold steel against his throat and a voice like winter. "You've been asking about fragment bearers. Why?" He froze. The truth fragment screamed warnings, but it was too late. The shadow bearer had moved faster than prediction. "I want to help you," Elias managed. "Lies." The blade pressed harder. "Wait!" Lyra lunged forward, but Kira moved like liquid darkness, suddenly behind her with a knife to Lyra's kidney. "Everyone stay very still," Kira said quietly, "or I start killing." "I'm not lying," Elias said, forcing calm into his voice. "The fragments are corrupting all of us. You can feel it, can't you? The way it makes everything simpler, colder. The way it wants you to just stop caring." The blade hesitated. "I failed a contract 3 days ago," Kira said softly. "Couldn't finish it. Saw his child's drawing and just froze. That's never happened before." "Because you're fighting it," Elias said. "The others have already surrendered. Lyra thinks she's righteous. Thorn thinks he's logical. Selene doesn't think she needs emotions, but you—" "I'm still just broken enough to hesitate," Kira finished bitterly. She withdrew the blades and stepped back into the firelight. For the first time, Elias could see her clearly. Young, maybe 20, with the kind of eyes that had seen far too much far too soon. "What's your plan?" Kira asked. Elias explained the Crown Forge ritual, the need to gather all 7 fragments. He left out the final cost. The truth fragment warned him Kira would refuse if she knew. When he finished, Kira was quiet for a long time. "If I help you," she finally said, "and we succeed, I'll lose this power. Go back to being just another disposable assassin." "You'll go back to being human," Marin countered gently. Kira laughed, sharp and humorless. "I'm not sure I remember how." But she didn't leave. And when they broke camp the next morning, she traveled with them. It was a start. They found the Wanderer by accident. Or rather, he found them. A storm rolled across the plains with unnatural speed, purple lightning dancing between clouds. At its center walked a lone figure, violet eyes crackling with power. "Elias?" the Wanderer said, tilting his head. "Or, no, that's not right. Do I know you?" "Master Varen," Elias breathed. It all clicked into place. Master Elkin Varen, chief archivist of the Grand Archive, Elias's mentor for 5 years, the man who taught him everything about the Crown's history. "Varen?" The Wanderer frowned. "That sounds familiar?" "You trained me," Elias said, stepping closer. "We worked together. You were at the spire when it shattered." "Was I?" Lightning crackled around the Wanderer's hands nervously. I was going somewhere, doing something, but I can't." His face twisted in frustration and the storm intensified. "It's the fragment," Marin said gently. "It's taking your memories, trading them for power." "Oh." The Wanderer looked down at his hands, watching electricity dance between his fingers. "That's unfortunate." Despite everything, Elias laughed, sharp and pained. Of course. Even with his mind dissolving, Varen was still understating disasters. "Come with us," Elias said. "Please, we're trying to fix this." "Fix what?" "The crown, the fragments, all of it." The Wanderer considered this. Already, Elias could see confusion creeping back into his eyes, the conversation fading even as they spoke. "All right," the Wanderer said, "but you'll need to remind me, frequently." They traveled together for the next week, and Elias learned to live with the cycle. Every morning Varen woke with no memory of the previous day. Every morning Elias reintroduced their mission. Some days Varen remembered fragments of his old life, lessons he'd taught, books he'd loved, a sister in the desert empire he couldn't quite recall. Other days he was a complete stranger who happened to follow them, but he never left. Even when memory failed, something deeper remained, an instinctive trust, a sense of purpose he couldn't articulate. Elias hoped it would be enough. They reached the volcanic isles by ship, and Elias could see the devastation from the harbor. Half of Prince Rowan's palace was rubble. Scorch marks covered the city walls. Refugees crowded the docks, fleeing inland. "This keeps getting worse," Lyra muttered. They found Rowan in the palace ruins, sitting on a half-melted throne and staring at his hands. The crimson fragment glowed in his chest like a second heart. "Elias?" Rowan looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Gods, is it really you?" "Hello, Rowan." They'd studied together at the university years ago. Rowan had been good-natured if insecure, always trying to prove himself to a father who valued strength over intelligence. Now his father's throne room was ash. "I killed them," Rowan said hollowly. "Not directly, but the fires. I lost control and they spread. Servants, advisors, my own father." His hands ignited briefly, and he flinched, snuffing the flames. "I can't control it anymore. Every time I feel anything, anger, fear, even joy, the fire comes. And it feels good, Elias. That's the worst part. It feels powerful and right, and I know," Elias said quietly. "The fragment is amplifying everything you feel. But we can stop it." He explained the plan again. This time he mentioned the ritual would be dangerous. Still not the full truth, but closer. Rowan listened in silence. "If we do this," the prince finally said, "and the fragments are destroyed, I'll just be weak again, powerless, the prince who couldn't save anyone." "No," Kira said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to look at her. "You'll be the prince who chose to give up power to save his people. That's not weakness." Rowan studied her, the assassin who understood self-loathing. "What's your name?" "Kira." "Thanks, Kira." He stood brushing ash from his royal coat. "All right, Elias, I'm in, but we need to move fast. I can feel the fragment pushing harder every day. Soon I won't want to give it up." "Soon," Jax muttered. "Kid, that's everyone's problem." News reached them in the highlands. General Thorn had begun his march south, 20,000 northern warriors, moving like an iron tide across the frozen wastes. Reports said Thorn himself led from the front, invincible and unstoppable. "He'll hit the plains first," Lyra said, studying the maps Marin had spread across their camp table. "That's Alira's kingdom." "Let them fight," Jack suggested. "Two fragment bearers eliminating each other is—" "Thousands will die," Elias cut in sharply, "and the instability will spread. Every time a bearer uses their full power, reality weakens. A full-scale war between Thorn and Alira could tear open the veil completely." "Then we need to reach them first," Marin said. "Convince them to stop." Kira snorted. "Good luck. Thorn sees compromise as weakness. And Alira." "Alira thinks she's saving everyone," Rowan finished quietly. "I know the type. I was becoming it." The Wanderer looked up from the fire. "Why are we stopping a war?" "Because if we don't, there won't be a world left to save," Elias said. "Oh." The Wanderer nodded sagely. "That seems important." Thunder rumbled overhead, and Varen smiled, pleased to contribute even if he couldn't remember why. They found Alira's army camped at the Crownford River. 10,000 soldiers, their armor gleaming, their banners showing the rising sun of the Central Plains. Elira herself stood atop a command platform, glowing like a divine statue. "Elias Marrow," she called down, her voice carrying unnaturally. "I heard you survived. The crown protects its faithful." "Your Majesty," Elias began carefully, "I need to speak with you. About the fragment." "Is a blessing," Elira interrupted, descending the platform in a swirl of golden light. "Surely you see that. In a time of chaos, I have been given the power to heal, to protect, to unite." Up close, Elias could see the zealous gleam in her eyes. The truth fragment showed him her thoughts, a tangled web of genuine compassion twisted into divine mandate. "Thorn is marching south with an army," Elira continued. "He will destroy everything in his path, but I will stop him. And then I will bring order to the other kingdoms, gently if they submit, forcefully if they refuse." "You're talking about conquest," Lara said flatly. "I'm talking about peace," Elira corrected, her glow intensifying. "True, lasting peace under wise guidance. My guidance." "That's not peace," Elias said. "That's tyranny." Elira's smile didn't waver, but her light grew painful to look at. "You're young, Elias. You don't understand yet. Freedom without order is just chaos. These people need someone to lead them to righteousness." "They need someone to let them choose," Kira said quietly. Elira finally looked at her. Really looked. "The Shadow Bearer. I'd heard you were traveling with the archivist. Why?" "Because I'm not ready to lose myself completely," Kira said. "Are you?" For just a moment something flickered in Elira's expression. Doubt, fear, recognition. Then it hardened into absolute certainty. "I haven't lost myself. I found my purpose." She raised her hand and light filled the camp, forcing them to shield their eyes. "Go, Elias, I won't harm you. You were always kind. But don't interfere with my mission. The continent will be united, whether by choice or by force." They retreated. There was nothing else to do. "She's too far gone," Lyra said once they were safely away. "No," Elias said quietly, watching futures branch and collapse. "She's just convinced herself that the corruption is conviction. But there's still doubt buried underneath. If we can reach it—" "Before she conquers the continent?" Jax asked skeptically. Elias didn't answer. The truth fragment showed him the coming battle. Elira's righteous crusade meeting Thorn's iron conquest. It would be a massacre. The armies met at the ruins of the old capital. Somehow it felt fitting. Two god-touched tyrants fighting for dominance where the crown once maintained peace. Elias's group watched from the shattered remains of the Grand Archive, hidden among rubble that had once been his home. "We should leave," Marin said nervously. "If they see us—" "They won't," Kira said, shadows wrapping around the group like a cloak. "I'll make sure of it." Below, Thorn's Northern Legion crashed against Elira's central army like a metallic tide. The general himself waded through the front lines, invincible, unstoppable, cutting down soldiers with casual efficiency. Then Elira descended from the sky, glowing like a second sun. "Thorn!" Her voice echoed across the battlefield. "Surrender! I don't want to kill you!" Thorn laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Kill me? Try!" He charged. Elira met him with a blast of pure light that would have incinerated a normal man. Thorn walked through it, skin gleaming silver, unharmed. "The crown's blessing is wasted on someone so weak," Thorn sneered, swinging his blade. "Power exists to be used." Their clash shook the ground. Light and iron compassion twisted into domination, strength warped into cruelty, two sides of the same corrupted coin. Soldiers died around them, forgotten casualties in a divine confrontation. "We have to stop this," Rowan said, flames already dancing along his arms. "How?" Lyra asked. "You can't fight them both." "Maybe I don't have to fight them." Rowan leaped from their hiding place before anyone could stop him, landing between the two fragment bearers in an explosion of crimson fire. "Enough!" Both Thorn and Elira stopped, more from surprise than obedience. "Prince Rowan," Elira said, her glow dimming slightly. "What are you doing?" "What you should have done from the start," Rowan said, and Elias could hear the desperate control in his voice, the effort it took not to simply unleash everything, remembering that we're still human. Humans are weak, Thorn growled. No, humans choose. Rowan looked between them, flames swirling. The fragments are amplifying our worst instincts. Can't you feel it? The way every emotion gets pushed to the extreme? For a moment's silence. Then Thorn lunged. Rowan unleashed his flames in a defensive wall, but Thorn was already inside his guard, metal fist crashing into the prince's chest. Rowan flew backward, hitting rubble hard. Weakness, Thorn said simply. A lyra hit him with concentrated divine light, a beam that carved through stone and steel. It threw Thorn back 50 feet, but when he stood, his skin was already reknitting. Your light is nothing, Thorn said. I am inevitable. He charged again. The battle spiraled out of control. Rowan's flames met, Alira's light met. Thorn's unstoppable advance. Reality began to warp around them, gravity fluctuating, colors bleeding wrong, the sky cracking like glass. The veil is breaking, Marin said in horror, watching their resonance meters spike. If they keep this up, Elias. The Wanderer spoke suddenly, violet eyes clear for the first time in days. Elias, I remember something. Everyone turned. The ritual, Varen continued, memories flooding back briefly. At the Crown Forge. The fragments need to be reunited, but there's a price. Someone has to... He stopped, confusion creeping back. What was I saying? But Elias had already seen the truth. The fragment in his chest pulsed, confirming what he'd been avoiding. The ritual required sacrifice, a life, freely given to anchor the reforged prison. Marin, Elias said quietly, get everyone to the Crown Forge, now. What about you? I'm going to get them to follow. Before anyone could argue, Elias stepped out from their hiding place and shouted, The Crown Forge is open! 3 pairs of divine eyes locked onto him. The ritual to reunite the fragments, Elias continued, feeling his heart hammer. I know where it is. Come with me or destroy each other. Your choice. You, Alira breathed. You know how to fix this? I know how to end it, Elias said. Not quite a lie. Thorn laughed. Why would I give up this power? Because eventually the corruption will consume everything you are, Elias said, meeting the general's eyes. You think you're using the fragment, but it's using you. All of you. He looked at each bearer in turn. You're not conquerors or saviors or warriors, Elias continued. You're prisoners, and the only way out is together. Silence fell across the battlefield. Then Alira lowered her hands, light dimming. Show me. Thorn spat. Coward. But he followed anyway, because even corrupted beyond recognition, some part of him knew Elias was right. The Crown Forge lay buried beneath the shattered capital, deep in caverns that predated recorded history. Elias led them down through collapsed tunnels and ancient stairways, following memories the truth fragment provided. Behind him walked 3 fragment bearers, Rowan, Alira, and Thorn, maintaining uneasy distance from each other. His own group followed, Lyra, Marin, Jax, Kira, and the Wanderer, 7 bearers, 7 fragments, except they were still missing Selene. The Crown Forge itself was a massive circular chamber carved from black stone, covered in glowing runes that pulsed with the same rhythm as the fragments. At the center stood a raised platform with 7 indentations, each one shaped for a specific shard. Here, Elias said, this is where the first arcanists originally imprisoned the celestial entity. If we can place all 7 fragments in their positions simultaneously... What then? Kira asked quietly. Elias hesitated. The truth fragment screamed at him to tell them everything, but he knew if he revealed the full cost now, they'd scatter. Alira would try to find another way. Thorn would attempt to seize all the fragments for himself. Rowan would sacrifice himself prematurely. Then the entity returns to dormancy, Elias said, technically true, and the corruption ends. And we lose our power, Rowan added. Yes. Good, Kira said simply. She stepped forward and placed her hand on one of the indentations. The obsidian fragment in her chest began to glow. Rowan joined her without hesitation, placing his hand on the crimson indentation. Alira looked at the golden indentation, then at her glowing palm. If I do this, who will guide them? Who will protect the people? They'll protect themselves, Lyra said. The way they did before the crown, the way they were always meant to. Alira's expression crumbled. Just for a moment, the weight of her corruption visible. Then she stepped forward. All right. For true peace. Only Thorn remained apart, arms crossed. I won't give up my strength, he said flatly. Then you'll be alone with it, Elias said. Forever, growing stronger and emptier until there's nothing left of you but the fragment's will. Thorn's jaw clenched. For a long moment no one spoke. Then slowly he approached the silver indentation. If this is a trick, Archivist, I'll kill you first. Noted. 4 bearers in position, 3 more needed. Where's Selene? Marin asked, checking their instruments. And the Wanderer's fragment is storm-aligned, not where did he go? They found Varen standing outside the Crown Forge entrance, staring at the runes with tears streaming down his face. I remember, he whispered. Elias, I remember everything. Master Varen, I know what the ritual requires. Varen turned and his eyes were completely lucid. A life. The fragments can be reunited, the entity re-imprisoned, but it needs an anchor, a willing sacrifice to hold the seal. The others heard. Elias felt their shock like a physical blow. You lied, Thorn growled. I delayed the truth, Elias corrected, feeling the amber fragment burn. Because you wouldn't have come otherwise. Damn right we wouldn't have. I'll do it, Kira said. Everyone stopped. The assassin stood calmly in the chamber's center, one hand still on her indentation. I'll be the sacrifice. Makes sense, my whole life has been about death anyway. No, Rowan protested. You can't just... Why not? Kira smiled, sad and genuine. I've been searching for something worth dying for since I was a child. This is it. There has to be another way, Alira said desperately. I could heal the damage or contain it or... There isn't. Elias's voice cracked. The truth fragment doesn't lie. This is the only path. Silence filled the Crown Forge. Then new footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. Elder Selene emerged from the shadows, white fragment gleaming on her forehead. Behind her stood a young man in cultist robes, scarred, desperate-eyed, clutching a bloody dagger. Master, the young man pleaded, please, you have to stop them. The crown was tyranny. The entity deserves freedom. Selene raised one hand and absolute silence fell. The cultist's mouth kept moving, but no sound emerged. Terror filled his eyes. Arden, Selene said softly, the first word anyone had heard her speak in weeks. You shattered the crown. The cultist, Arden, nodded frantically, tears streaming. You believed you were freeing the world from false order, Selene continued, walking past him into the Crown Forge. You sabotaged the prison during the eclipse, thinking chaos would bring enlightenment. She looked at each of them in turn, bearer and companion alike. I thought the same thing. That emotion was inefficiency. That silence was clarity. Selene touched her fragment. But I was wrong. We were both wrong. Master, please... Arden tried to speak, but no sound came. The fragments showed us amplified versions of ourselves, Selene said. They took our philosophies and pushed them past wisdom into madness. I valued peace and clarity, so it gave me emptiness. You valued freedom, so it gave you destruction. She stepped to the white indentation, placing her hand upon it. I won't force you to live with what you've done, Arden, but I won't let you stop us from fixing it either. The silence around Arden intensified, and he collapsed, unconscious but breathing. Elder Selene, Elias said carefully, the ritual requires... I know what it requires. Selene's voice was calm, emotionless, but Elias saw tears on her cheeks. I heard everything from the tunnel, and I understand now, true clarity isn't the absence of emotion. It's the wisdom to know when sacrifice is necessary. No, Kira said firmly. I already chose... You're young, Selene interrupted gently. You have decades to learn what it means to be human again. I'm old, and I've already learned everything I needed to know. She looked at Elias. Besides, the ritual requires someone with willing acceptance, not desperate self-destruction. Your choice comes from pain, child. Mine comes from peace. Kira opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Selene had silenced her, gently, compassionately. Now, Selene said, where's the 7th bearer? The Wanderer stepped forward, eyes still clear with temporary memory. That would be me. He placed his hand on the violet indentation, and lightning crackled softly around the chamber. 7 bearers, 7 fragments, 7 positions filled. Elias, Varen said quietly. You need to activate the mechanism. Quickly, before I forget again. Elias approached the central pillar where ancient controls waited. His hands shook. Wait, Lyra said. Elias, you have a fragment too. The truth shard. Elias froze. If the ritual requires all 7 fragments, Lyra continued, horror dawning, and you're the 7th bearer, then the sacrifice can't be Selene, Merrin finished. It has to be you. The truth fragment pulsed once, confirming what Elias had always known but never admitted. He was the anchor. He'd always been the anchor. No, Rowan said. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. There isn't. Elias felt strangely calm. The truth fragment chose me because I could see all possible futures, and in every single one where someone else dies, the ritual fails. Why? Thorn demanded. Because the entity needs truth to be contained, Elias explained. Not light or shadow or flame. Truth. Unfiltered reality. And that means the truth-bearer has to willingly surrender everything, knowing exactly what it costs. He looked at Selene. You were willing, but you're not the anchor the entity needs. Selene lowered her hand from the indentation, understanding in her eyes. How long have you known? Kira asked quietly. Since the moment the fragment embedded itself in me, Elias admitted. I couldn't accept it. So I lied to myself, delayed the truth, the same way I lied to all of you. You didn't lie, Lyra said fiercely. You did what you had to do to save everyone. I manipulated you into coming here knowing one of you would die. No, Merrin corrected. You brought us here knowing you would die. There's a difference. Elias smiled weakly. I'm not sure there is. The Wanderer spoke suddenly. I won't remember this, will I? After the ritual completes, my memories will stabilize, but this moment, you, will just be a gap I can't explain. Probably, Elias said. Then I want to say it while I can. Thank you. For reminding me what I was fighting for, even when I couldn't remember. You were always the better archivist, Elias. Master Varen. Activate the mechanism, Varen said gently, before I forget why we're here. Elias looked at each of them, his mentor, his allies, the bearers he'd hunted and convinced and dragged to this moment. I'm sorry, he said. Then he placed his hands on the central controls and activated the crown forge. Light erupted from all 7 indentations simultaneously. Gold, silver, crimson, obsidian, white, violet, and amber, spiraling upward in a helix of pure power. The fragments began to tear free from their bearers. Rowan screamed as fire peeled away from his chest. Alira gasped as divine light ripped from her palm. Thorn's silver skin cracked and bled. Kira's shadows writhed like living things before dissolving. Selene's silence shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Varen's storm essence tore away, leaving him gasping and empty. And Elias felt the truth fragment burning through his ribcage, pulling everything with it, every memory, every possibility, every future he'd foreseen. The entity's essence condensed above them, taking shape, a being of pure starlight and void, neither malicious nor benevolent, simply vast. It looked at Elias with eyes like collapsing galaxies. You understand, it said directly into his mind, the price of binding. I do, Elias whispered. You could let me go. Free us both. I could, but then everyone I love would die, so no. The entity almost seemed to smile. Then be my jailer, truth-bearer. Hold the prison closed with your will. The 7 fragments fused together, reforming not into the high crown that was destroyed forever, but into something new. A seal, a lock, a promise written in celestial fire. And Elias was the key. He felt himself dissolving, consciousness spreading across the seal like ink in water. His body remained standing at the central pillar, but everything that made him him was being pulled into the prison mechanism. Elias! Lyra lunged forward, but Merrin held her back. You can't, Merrin said through tears. The ritual is already complete. Elias wanted to say goodbye, wanted to tell them it was worth it, that he wasn't afraid, that they'd done everything right. But his voice was already gone, merged with the seal. The last thing he saw was Kira, the assassin who'd chosen humanity over power, placing one hand over her heart in a final salute. Then the light consumed everything, and Elias Marrow ceased to exist. They found themselves outside the Crown Forge, collapsed in the rubble of the old capital. The fragments were gone. The divine powers vanished. The cracks in reality had sealed. Lyra was the first to stand, searching frantically. "Elias? Elias!" But the archivist was nowhere to be found. Where the Crown Forge entrance had been, only smooth stone remained, sealed permanently, taking Elias's body with it. A single inscription glowed briefly in amber light before fading. "Here lies the truth-bearer who gave everything so that others might choose." "He's gone," Rowan said hollowly. Smoke rose from his palms. Normal smoke now without the unnatural flame. "He's really gone." Alira wept, her tears ordinary and human. "I almost destroyed everything. If he hadn't stopped me—" "He stopped all of us," Thorn said quietly. The general's skin was flesh again, bleeding from a dozen wounds he could finally feel. "Showed us what we'd become." Kira stood apart, staring at her hands. Without the shadow fragment, she was just a young woman, scarred, exhausted, alive. "He saved me," she whispered. "I was ready to die, and he saved me anyway." Marin pulled out their journal with shaking hands. "Someone needs to record this. What happened here? Who he was? What he sacrificed?" "I'll help," Lyra said roughly, wiping her eyes. "The world needs to know." The Wanderer, Aetheron, no longer wandering, approached the sealed Crown Forge entrance. His memories were stable now, but he couldn't remember the past 3 weeks. Just knew, deep in his bones, that someone important was gone. "Who was the seventh bearer?" he asked softly. "A friend," Lyra said. "The best of us." 6 months later, the continent had changed. Queen Alira abdicated her throne, spending her remaining years in service to the people she'd almost enslaved. She built hospitals and schools, offering genuine compassion without divine compulsion. General Thorn returned to the north and surrendered to his own people's justice. They exiled him, not to punish, but to give him a chance to learn humility. He wandered the continent, helping rebuild what he'd destroyed. Prince Rowan became a wise and measured ruler of the volcanic isles, tempering his decisions with remembered fire. He never forgot what unchecked passion could do. Elder Selene rejoined her temple, teaching her acolytes that true wisdom required both logic and emotion. She spoke often of the archivist, who'd shown her that silence was not the same as peace. Aetheron rebuilt the Grand Archive with help from scholars across the continent. The first book he catalogued was Marin's Chronicle, The Shattered Crown, a True History. Kira disappeared into the world, no longer an assassin, but not quite anything else. Some said she protected villages from bandits, others claimed she helped refugees find safety. She never stayed long enough for anyone to thank her. Jax opened a tavern in the rebuilt capital, where fragment bearers and their companions gathered annually to remember the man who'd saved them all. And Lyra. Lyra stood before the sealed Crown Forge on the anniversary of Elias's sacrifice, laying down a bundle of his favorite books, histories, and treatises he'd loved. "You once told me," she said to the stone, "that the best future wasn't the one where heroes saved everyone. It was the one where people learned to save themselves." The inscription glowed faintly in response, amber light, warm and gentle. "You were right," Lyra continued. "The kingdoms are governing themselves now. Imperfect, messy, but free. No crown, no divine mandate. Just people trying their best." She placed her hand on the seal. "I hope, wherever you are, you can see it. The world you gave everything to protect." Deep beneath the stone, beyond perception or sense, something that had once been Elias Marrow felt the warmth of her words. He couldn't respond. Couldn't think, really. Not as a separate being. He was the seal now, the prison, the eternal lock keeping the celestial entity dormant. But he could feel. And he felt peace. The continent healed slowly, building something new from the ashes of the old. There were still wars, still injustice, still suffering, because people were people, flawed and struggling. But they were choosing their path now. And that, Elias thought from within the eternal seal, was worth everything. In the ruins of the old capital, where the high crown once stood, a single amber crystal grows from the stone. Scholars say it glows when truth is spoken nearby, a reminder that some sacrifices echo forever, and some heroes are never truly gone. They're just part of a different story now. A story still being written. By everyone. The Shattered Crown explores the corruption of power and the price of truth in a world where divinity and humanity collide. Each fragment bearer represents a virtue pushed past virtue into vice, compassion into control, strength into cruelty, efficiency into emptiness. Elias's journey is one of acceptance, understanding that some battles can only be won through sacrifice, and some truths can only be spoken by those willing to become the answer to their own question. In the end, the crown doesn't return. The age of divine authority is over. What replaces it is messy, uncertain, and entirely human, and perhaps that's the point. Thank you for watching. Please support us by liking, subscribing, and commenting about your favorite characters below.